Okay, I am back with another Petty Pendergrass production, where I will be bringing up a story, or should I say the outcome of a story that I talked about months ago. Now, in case you don't know who this guy in this picture is, I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory. This man's name is Thomas Gilbert Jr. He is 35 years old, and a few months ago, he killed his dad for the most silliest thing. So this guy comes from a very privileged family. Father was very wealthy. So he is a Princeton graduate, and he's pretty much a bum. He literally wasted his time while in school. He wasted his parents' money and everything like that. But they still loved and cared for their son. So his dad basically gave their son, which is him, a $1,000 a week allowance. All he had to do was not be a fuck up. Just have his shit together and he would be good. He couldn't even do that right, and that didn't take much to do. So what his dad decided to do to teach his son a lesson was knock $700 off of his weekly allowance, from $1,000 to $300 a week. His son got so mad at that literally hours after his dad did it, he killed him. All because of that. Well, that was then, and this is now. Now the verdict has come out, and this imbecile has been sentenced 30 years to life in prison for the brutal murder of his dad. I'm gonna go ahead and read this article and see what other developments we find out about it. Princeton graduate Thomas Gilbert Jr. was sentenced Friday to 30 years to life in prison after shooting and killing his wealthy father in 2015 following a dispute over his weekly allowance. Gilbert Jr., age 35, was convicted 3 months ago in the killing of his 70-year-old father at his parents' home on Manhattan's East Side. The jury rejected the defendant's insanity during the defense. The younger Gilbert was relying on his parents for basic daily expenses and has been unable to hold down a job. He received a weekly $1,000 allowance from his parents, which the defendant spent on travel and other personal expenses. That allowance had been cut prior to the killing. Gilbert Sr. reduces his son's allowance to $300 a week before the shooting, a prosecutor said, according to a CNN report. Gilbert Sr. was the founder and manager of the New York-based Wayne Scott Capital Partners Fund. In a victim impact statement, the victim's wife, Shelley Gilbert, asked for Gilbert Jr. to be given a light sentence as possible. Now, what's interesting about this is that this is the wife saying this on the behalf of her son, who just murdered her husband, who I truly believe was the financial breadwinner of the family. And it's like you're trying to get the person off who just literally put a dent into how your life is. Unless there's some money set aside and you'll be good for the rest of your life. Why were you trying to cover for this guy even though he's your son? You're covering for a bum at the end of the day. Their son was a bum, a lazy freeloader. She said the family had been seeking medical help for the defendant for years because he's too sick to be able to judge. Now, what does that sound like? Doesn't that sound like Ethan Couch? He's too rich to know what he's doing. See, that whole thing about they're too wealthy to do this and they're too wealthy to do this, that got thrown out the window in this case. Maybe it's because of who the dad was. I'm not sure. It says the jury found that Gilbert Jr., who was also convicted on charges of criminal possession of a weapon, murdered his father with a shot to the head at close range. The weapon, a semi-automatic pistol, was purchased months earlier from an Ohio seller. The defendant put the gun in his father's hand in an attempt to stage the death as a suicide. Thomas Gilbert Sr. was a beloved member of his family and business community when his own son murdered him in a cold-blooded killing. District Attorney Cyrus Vance said Friday in a statement, "But now, thanks to my office's prosecutors, the defendant has finally been held accountable, and he will serve a life sentence for this unconscionable crime." And it's very rare in cases like these that a very privileged individual actually goes to jail for their crimes. But let's be real here. If the person he killed looked like one of us, they probably would have gave him a slight tap on the wrist. One of the main reasons they did is because it's obvious. The father is palm colored, and two, it's his dad. And there's no way they were going to let him get away with it. They didn't even let him get away with the mental illness plea, which is something they love to peddle a lot. Even his own mother's, whatever she said, which made no sense, didn't help him either. When I found out about this story months ago, I said, He is the white equivalent of what many would call the ain't shit nigga. Like, all he did was live off of his parents' weekly expenses. He never held down a job, which really basically translates into he never went out to look for a job. He always planned to live off of his parents. He just basically was a freeloader. He was a freeloading bum. He traveled on their dime. He probably got with loose women on their dime. He spent a whole boatload of money that was their dime. And I guess the money was supposed to be a push to get him in the right direction, but he had what you call failure to launch syndrome, basically meaning he was never going to leave off of that launch pad. He was not going to rocket into the stratosphere. They probably wanted him to be something. They probably sent him to the nicest schools, and none of that worked. They just gave birth to a bum. And unfortunately, I guess in their case, the wrong sperm reached the egg first before the others did. He's just a natural born fuck up. That's pretty much all I can boil it down to. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments, and I'll talk to you in the next one.